In this session, we're going to do an overview of the dispatch portal. When you first log into the dispatch portal, the default view is your dispatch screen. And any trips for today's data service or the data service for which the day you log in will list all of the trips below that have been assigned to drivers. We're going to start over at the Schedules tab. And the Schedule tab has all of your unassigned trips. And there's a couple of ways to assign drivers to the trips. The first way is to click on Apply Default Driver. The system has the ability for you to make a connection between the driver and the client. So if that connection has been made to any of these trips, any of these 5 trips, and I click Apply Default, that trip is then assigned to that driver. So if you notice, we went from 5 trips to 4, so there was one member that had a default driver assigned. In order to make that connection, you click on Assign Driver, and at the top you can assign a default driver. And I'm going to set Jacob here as the default driver for this client, Joe. And then if I close that screen, then every time I come into the Schedules tab, I can then click on Apply Default Driver to start, and then all of those trips will be pre-assigned to that specific driver. We can also assign a driver by clicking on the Assign Driver button. And we can assign a driver to a trip. And that updates Jacob Luger to this trip. So if I come in back to the Schedules screen and refresh the list, that trip disappears and now has been assigned to Jacob Luger. You can finally also assign a different driver to each leg. And now I've assigned Jones to leg 1 and Jacob to leg 2, and their associated vehicles also appear on the screen. And close. And if I refresh the list again, so every time you make the assignment, this list gets shorter and shorter. Down at the bottom, you have the ability to review a driver's current schedule. So if you choose a driver and specify today's date, you'll see everything that's been assigned to this driver. We also have a calendar view on the right hand side here that shows you the same schedule but in a different view. The idea of having the driver's schedule on this form allows you to view their currently scheduled trips for that day and then make a decision if they have the availability to then pick up another trip. So if I look at the top, this trip has a pickup time of 6 p.m. and if I look at this client's or this driver's schedule, I can see that he has a trip for 4 p.m. scheduled. So it appears that I could assign Jacob Luger to this 6 p.m. trip. You also have the ability to filter out the scheduled list. You can filter it by client, you can filter it by an auth number, you can filter out by city. So you could pull up all of the Minneapolises or all of the St. Clouds on this list and schedule them out by zones. The last piece on the Schedule tab is there's a button called Auto Schedule, and this is currently in development. And we're hoping to release this at some point this calendar year, 2016. But this will automate your scheduling process based on a number of criteria. When that becomes available, we'll put out a unique training session just for that process in particular. All right, before we go back to the Dispatch tab, I'm going to touch on a few other of the tabs. And the Clients tab allows you to search for a client. So I want to search for all clients with the last name of Jackson. And then the search results, I have 3 options to choose from. And I'm going to choose Joe Jackson, and essentially I just get shown a history for that client. So here's all the history in the system for this client. The drivers tab gives you the ability to set up new drivers, edit current drivers, or inactivate drivers. And there is a training session on driver setup, so you can review that particular video for more detail. The discrepancies tab would show you any trips that may have issues in terms of the driver assignment and their ability to service that trip. So in this example, we can see that Jacob Luger is assigned to 2 different trips. The appointment time, both at 9:15, but the pickup addresses are different locations. So that would be a potential discrepancy, or an obvious discrepancy, where you would potentially want to reassign one of these trips to a different driver. We're going to move over to the admin tab. The admin tab is only available or viewable for users with full access to the software. So if you're in the dispatch portal and don't see this tab, it's because you don't have rights to see it. On the admin tab, you have access to all the vehicles. You can add new vehicles. You can assign devices to those vehicles, as well as assign drivers to those vehicles. You have access to gas cards, so you can set up gas cards, as well as then assign, if I click edit on a vehicle, you can assign available gas cards to a vehicle as well. You have access to adding the onboard GPS devices. So if I click on devices, you can edit any device and you can retire it. You can give it a unique name for better identification with the linking to the vehicle. And you can also add new devices. The trip sheet list emulates the trip verification within the back-end software. So if I click on trip sheet list, you have the ability to review all of your trips, as well as update the statuses of those trips to a ready to bill. Any trips that have utilized the GPS devices that has been linked to the vehicle and to the driver, you have the ability to then click on route and review a map view of those trips. We're now going to move over to the dispatch tab. And this is the main screen that your dispatchers would work out of. There's a couple of benefits of your dispatchers utilizing the web portal over the Access database in terms of scheduling and dispatching. As rides complete, they will filter out of this screen, so you're really only working with active and non-complete trips. Alright, a dispatcher has the ability to no-show a visit, as well as the driver has that ability as well. But then they also have the ability to cancel a ride from within the dispatch portal here. You can click on the ID button and you can see some details of the trip. If you need to change the appointment time, HR number, even the date of service, you can click on Edit Trip and you can modify the trip. So if you needed to change the appointment time from 8:30 to 9 and the scheduled pickup time to 8:30, you can do that and save and close. And then if I refresh the screen, that change is made. You You can also edit a particular leg of a trip. You can insert legs. You can send an email out to your driver with the details of a particular leg, and you can also then text message a driver. And you can modify the text within the email if you need to, otherwise it just gives you some specifics of that trip. You also have the ability for return rides that are set to will call to change the status of that trip to return ride, and it will automate a text message out to the driver. So if I click on edit for the second leg and change the leg status to RR for return ride and then save that leg, a text message will be sent out to that particular driver indicating that the client is ready to be picked up. There's a number of filters at the top of the screen. You can search by driver. So if I type in Luger, it's going to give me a list of all the drivers with that last name. And it's going to show me all the trips associated with that driver. You can search by a client, you can search by pickup city, as well as you can filter by trip status. You also have the ability to add a ride within the dispatch portal. And we're going to go through that process now. So I'm going to click Add New Ride. And this emulates the access side. We can search for an ID number. And if it exists, the name will populate. And we can move on and add some trip notes, some client notes. Again, we can specify the pickup location as either the client home or the alternate, or we can specify a clinic. So we can search for a clinic and choose that as the pickup location. We can specify a unique pickup phone number if it's different from their main phone number. We can specify the destination in the same manner. And once we have the pickup and destination, we can calculate the mileage. If you know it to be a multiple rider trip, you can specify that now. We can specify the trip date, the appointment time. You can also identify the pickup time. Indicate the authorization number. If it's a Medica trip, you put the Medica rep ID. If there's additional passengers that's going to ride with the client, you can indicate that here. If it's a UCare trip, you want to put the HR number in. And again, if it's multiple destination or one way, you want to choose the appropriate box. If there's no load or wait time authorized with this trip, you can check the box and you have the ability to type in the miles or the half-an-hour increments for wait time. And then also if it's wheelchair or stretcher, you can indicate that as well. Over on the driver, you have the ability to assign the driver at this time. This particular client has the default of Jacob Luger assigned, so that's why this appears in the screen. You can set it back to in-house, you can leave it at Jacob, or you can search for another driver and assign that person. If the driver had other items scheduled for that day, it would show up in the calendar as you see here. So prior to scheduling, you could see that this appointment's set for 8 a.m., but this driver already has a pickup assigned for 8 a.m. So you may want to choose a different driver. If it's a round trip, you just save and close, and that will complete the trip entry. But you also have the ability to just add the next trip. So if you click Add Next Trip, it's going to save that previous trip as a round trip, and you can go right into entering your next trip. So I'm going to enter in another ID number. And in this case, the ID number doesn't appear in the list, so I need to add a new client. So from here we can enter in all the demographic of the new client. We identify who the payer is, the resident type, first and last name, middle name if they have one, gender, date of birth, apartment if they have one. Again, we can get the zip just like we can inside the access. You have the ability to put an MA number and a social security number, but typically you don't have that information, and then we can add this client. The default for the pickup location is always the client's home address that you just typed, but you can certainly change that. Then we want to choose the destination. And we want to find a clinic. And mileage calc. And we can go through again here and put the appointment time just like we did on the previous trip and the scheduled pickup time. We'll put the confirmation number for the trip, and if we do one way, the trip will be built one way. And we can just save and close for a one-way trip. You can add next trip again. If it's a multiple destination, we would go save and next, and it will bring us to the second leg. So it shows you that the pickup location is in Rochester, and you can specify another clinic or the client home or alternate. If a clinic is going to be the final destination, we'd hit mileage calc, and we can indicate that this is going to be the final destination. And then this changes to final destination down below, and that would save the trip. But you can continue on entering different legs up through leg 5. You have the ability to put in 5 different destinations for a leg. So I'm going to click add, so that's leg 2. I'm going to add leg 3, and I can do client home, and that sets the flag over here to the right as final destination. And I'm going to click that as final destination. As you can see, I forgot to calculate the mileage for this leg. So I need to go back and click mileage calc and click on final destination. And then your leg has been saved, or your trip has been saved. That concludes the overview of the dispatch portal.